quick caveat here. Then one can ask, which will tie into why rupee is not behaving the way it should behave. If this is the scale, right? Is that, if you want to get a lot of flows in the from the international banks, right? International bank cannot directly lend to NRI, right? It has to, uh, even if it's lent to an NRI, the deposit is the ultimate security, correct? But you cannot have a lien on a deposit. It's not simple. It's not that easy in terms of structuring. So the simpler way a lot of companies, banks do internationally is very common is what is called SBLC, standby letter of credit, right? So the way it works is, uh, uh, the Indian bank issues an SBLC, and based on that, effectively it's a guarantee. On that guarantee, basis of guarantee, they take the credit risk on the NRI and give them the 900 whatever leverage money, right? So the SBLC is the key structure here. So this is a standard. A lot of banking thing operates like this. Now the problem is the problem is twofold actually. One, the SBLC, if an Indian bank issues SBLC, right? A lot of articles in newspapers also on this, but this is actually a problem that if Indian banks issue a lot of huge amount of SBLCs, and if foreign banks take those SBLCs on their rather as guarantees and lend money, their India exposure becomes much higher, right? So it's not so their whole India exposure becomes, they're exposed to Indian banks much more than they would have otherwise, right? Let's say 30, 40, 50 billion is what is being discussed. So the overall India business will suffer because the other business will suffer because they can't do more because they have typically a country ceilings and all, right? So what they are now trying to say is, Indian banks, why don't you issue out of Dubai, out of Singapore, or not India directly, but out of the other branches and subsidiaries, so that in their systems it gets marked as Dubai exposure and country limits and Singapore country limit rather than India limit. So these are all things that are happening. So that's why it's not straightforward. Then the massive flows that are expected are not yet crystallized. And secondly, as I think earlier, late as yesterday or something, now there is another issue which come up, which is that if you want to issue these SBLCs and raise money through FCNR, Dubai is a primary center, right? 60% of NRI flows come from there, more than that actually. So this is the major source of FCNR funding. Now the problem is that the Dubai central regulator has said that the Indian banks who don't have branches there, rather any bank rather, which does not have a branch there, cannot do all the KYC and sourcing of deposits because that is not under their representative office remit, right? So only banks like SBI, Bank of Baroda, who actually have branches there, can do. So there are issues there. Obviously, clarification is being sought. So the point is, this whole structure is well set, but for the huge flows that are expected, if it can potentially go to 60, 70, 80 billion, possibly, right? But not really 100% all sorted. That is what the point I'm trying to make.